for a little bit over 13 years. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about citizenship. What is citizenship and why we should be citizens? And I always tell my clients every time I have an opportunity, we should all get that blue passport and be citizens as soon as we can. There's many advantages, and we all want to take advantage of everything. One of the main and I think most important right is the right to vote. And we do know elections matter. We do know that we want our voices to be heard. So we want to elect the people that are going to speak on our behalf, and we want to have a say on who is going to make decisions for us. So voting is always a good incentive. Jury, some people get elected to be part of the jury system, which means you can sit and hear evidence and other things in a trial and make a decision what is going to happen with the person who is being tried. Sponsorship, Ms. Batman explained to you how to sponsor family, relatives, and U.S. citizens have better options to sponsor relatives than non-U.S. citizens, and also the priority dates. If you're a U.S. citizen, your immediate relatives do not have to wait in line, as opposed to those who are not U.S. citizens. Government jobs. Some government jobs can only be held by U.S. citizens. Federal jobs, if you want to work in the post office, you need to be a U.S. citizen. In the VA hospitals, you have to be a U.S. citizen. It's not discrimination, it's the federal government, so that's how it works. No deportation. This is huge. What happens is once you are a citizen, they cannot deport you even if you kill someone, okay? When you are a legal permanent resident, for those who already obtained their permanent residency, you get a green card that is good for 10 years. It expires every 10 years. You have to renew your green card. And every time you submit that application to get the green card renewed, they will take your fingerprints and they will look into your background and determine whether or not you continue to be eligible to be a permanent resident. So you want to be a citizen, because you don't have to renew your citizenship, and you're not going to be subject to anything that later on may affect your permanent residency status. International travel. It's always good to travel with a blue passport because many countries do not require visas for U.S. citizens, so you can go in with your blue passport. So it's a good thing. Full protection of the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. We know what that means. We are protected. U.S. citizens have all the protections of the Constitution. So we want that on our side. Protection from anti-immigration laws. We go back to non-residents versus citizens and people who are here in different statuses. And elections matter. How to become a citizen? In general, there's a couple of requirements that we need to meet to be able to apply for the citizenship. You must be, well, first of all, you need to be a legal permanent resident, either 3 years or 5 years. If you're a legal permanent resident for 3 years and you're married to a U.S. citizen, that you got your green card or the legal permanent residence through that citizen, then you can apply for the citizenship in 3 years. If you obtain your green card or legal permanent residency through employment, then or other means, like my brother, my sister sponsored me, then you have to wait the 5 years. You have to be at least 18 years of age. And you must have resided continuously in the United States for at least half of the time that you're supposed to be a legal permanent resident. Let me give you a couple examples and you can see there. If you are supposed to be a legal permanent resident for 3 years, and once you complete the 3 years, you can apply for your citizenship. You have to demonstrate that at least 1.5 years of those 3 years, you were present in the United States. If you traveled in between, that may not be a problem. We can add up the time that you stay here. As long as it adds up to 1.5 years, you might qualify. The problem becomes if during the time that you were outside the United States, it was long enough to break that continuity. Okay? Yes, we hear frequently people get their green cards and they spend 4 months of the year in their home countries. They come, they spend here a couple months, then they leave again. Then is when you start adding up the time they spent here. And then is when you start looking at how long did they stay outside, more than 6 months or not, to look at whether there was any breaks in continuity. So if in doubt, I always tell people, talk to an attorney. Make sure you do qualify to apply within the required time. Because if not, the petition is going to be denied. It doesn't mean they're going to revoke your green card because the continuity was broken. It's just the petition is not going to be approved, and that's money and time that will be lost. Another thing that the Department of Immigration looks at, and they look at this element, the good moral character, during the qualifying period, the 3 years or the 5 years. This element or this requirement, the Department of Immigration look at this for everything we do with them. When you submit the green card petition, when you submit the I-485, when you go to the consulates, when you apply for your citizenship, they're always looking at good moral character, and that's a huge, huge area. They will look into if you have any criminal records, if you're a good person, if you're not a good person. YouTube, we're doing YouTube today. Facebook, all those medias, they do look at background, and they look at what kind of person you are beyond. You may not have a criminal record, but you may not be a good person. And they look at that. Exceptions, and when we do or apply for citizenship, we are tested on 2 things. And that's mainly the process. You file the petition, they do the fingerprints, you go, and they give you an appointment to go for an interview. At the interview, they will test people in 2 areas. One is English, that they read, speak, and understand English. Simple test. They're not going to have people reading a book or writing an essay or doing a dissertation. No, it's very simple. It's a normal conversation, couple of phrases people have to write down, a little paragraph they might have to read. It's just to see that they have a basic knowledge of the language. There's some people that might be exempt from taking the test in English, and this is called the 1555 or 2050 rule. What that means is, if the person is 55 years old and has been a U.S. permanent resident for 15 years or more, then the person might qualify to take the exam in their native language, the English exam. If the person is 50 years old and has been a legal permanent resident for 20 years or more, then they might qualify to take the test in their native language. And what test is that? Well, again, they don't need to speak English for this effect, but they will have to take the other test, which is the civic test. And we'll talk about that after I explain the last requirement, or the last exception is a person who is 60 years old and has lived as a permanent resident in the United States for 20 years or more. They may take a shorter civic test, and most certainly the interview is going to be in their native language. What is the civic test? The Department of Immigration has 100 questions, and the questions are posted in their website. Everyone has access to those questions. They are general questions about U.S. history, how we function, what is the government, when the people go to these interviews, the officer asks about 10 questions out of those 100 questions. It's a very simple test, because if you have the time to review, and probably some people might need to memorize, we all might need to memorize a few of those questions, but the other questions are pretty general knowledge. And the officers ask 10 questions out of those 100. They don't get out of those 100 questions. They don't get creative. And if you answer at least 6 questions good of those 10, then you pass the test. There's a assumption, and it's not even an exemption, it's more qualification. If a person has some sort of developmental disability or mental impairment that is demonstrated by medical exams, then the person is exempt from taking the exam, not even the English or the civics, nothing. But it has to be demonstrated by a medical exam. There's got to be a doctor that does an evaluation and that can provide a report to the Department of Immigration explaining the disability and why that person is not capable of learning the language or learning enough to take the civics test. There is a form, the Form 648, and physicians or the doctors who do these evaluations, they have that form, and they complete it, and then the immigration officer reviews it, and if the person is exempt, they won't have to take the test. Still, they'll have to take the oath. The biggest part of this process is not even the interview, is the oath. Because if you passed the test, the interview, if everything is good, you are not a citizen until you take the oath. Here in Dallas, I think they have a pretty good system. Sometimes people, they are scheduled to take the interview in the morning, and many of them, if they have enough people on one given day, they are asked to come back in the afternoon to take the oath. So, and we frequently see this with our clients, where they go for the interview in the morning, and in the afternoon they're giving us a copy of the citizenship certificate. In most other jurisdictions, they are not able to do that the same day, but most people, once they pass the test and they are okay to be admitted as citizens, then they are usually given about 30 days. Within 30 days after the interview, they receive a letter from the Department of Immigration giving them an appointment or a date and time to come to a specific place and take the oath. Once you take the oath, then you are a U.S. citizen. You get the certificate, you can go and apply for U.S. passport, go to the Social Security office, update your Social Security records, and do whatever you need to petition for your wife, your mother, your brother, your children. Statutory bars. These are those things that would prevent a person from becoming a U.S. citizen. These statutory bars are temporary bars or permanent bars. The temporary bars are prostitution, habitual drunkard, polygamy, shoplifting, drug violations, illegal gambling. And these are the kind of records that the Department of Immigration looks within the qualifying period. If you recall, at the beginning I was talking about the 3 and 5 year period where you can apply to become a permanent U.S. citizen. So they will look, if you were supposed to have 5 years before you can become a U.S. citizen, the Department of Immigration is going to be looking at the 5 years before from the time you apply for your citizenship. For example, 10 years ago, you would have been able to become a citizen, but for whatever reason, you did not apply, so you applied today. They are not going to be looking 10 years back. They're going to be looking at 5 years from the day you apply. what happened during those 5 years. And if you have any of these temporary bars, you might not be able to get that petition approved. It might be denied. Again, if it is denied here, your green card is not going to be taken away. It just means that maybe you need to wait a little bit longer so that the qualifying time past those records or whatever was done, and then after that, then you apply again, and the temporary bar is gone. Now, the permanent bar is the one that we need to worry about, because this means if there are some sort of convictions, well, again, murder, aggravated felonies, anti-government act, support violent overthrown or government, there's a list, a long list. Some crimes for immigration purposes, even though civilly they might be misdemeanors, for immigration purposes, they can become felonies. So, and there is where we always tell people, if you have anything in your record, always have an attorney to look it up. Because for the state of Texas, it just may be a misdemeanor, not a big deal, but when you start looking at federal statute, then you see it is considered a felony for purposes of immigration. If you have a permanent bar, or the person has a permanent bar, definitely should not apply for citizenship. And it's very likely that when that person applies to renew the green card, that person might end up in deportation proceedings. Because these are pretty big criminal records that not only prevent a person from becoming a citizen, but more than likely, it will prevent that person from continuing to be a legal permanent resident. The statutory bars, and we said there's temporary, permanent, and then we have the discretionary bars. Discretionary is up to the Department of Immigration officer. Ms. Badman's mentioned before about the waivers, where the officers can take a look at the waiver and then decide, oh, but this is not a hardship. Oh, yes, this is a hardship. They make the decision. Same here. You can have one of these infractions, and then the officer gets to decide whether or not they're going to waive that discretionary bar, or may say, no, this is a bar. At this time, we cannot approve your petition, denied. Then you'll have to apply later on, when you are now within those 5 years window or 3 years window. Not paying child support is a big one. So people should pay child support, definitely, always. But if they're going to apply for citizenship, they should be up to date on that one. Destroying marriages is rare. With extramarital affairs, no one pays attention to those things anymore. Failure to register for selective service and tax violations. Selective service. In the United States, we have a rule that says if you are in between 18 years of age and 26 years old, you must register for selective service. It doesn't mean you have to go to serve the country, it's just registration. If for any reason the person was here as a legal permanent resident during 18 years or 26 years of age, and they didn't register, and it falls within those 3 years or 5 years that they will look at what happened during this time, then that might be grounds for the person not to be able to get citizenship at that point. So what we've done with clients who have this little inconvenient, let's call it that way, we usually wait for them to pass that age where they were supposed to be registered, which means 26 is the maximum, 18 to 26. So if you are 32, 35, 33, at the time of filing it, they look back 5 years, you're not going to be 26 at that point. You will pass that discretionary bar. The risks of naturalization. This is not something most people think when they're thinking naturalization, because what is the risk? Well, there are certain risks. Reopens the applicant's immigration matters. Every time we apply for a benefit to the Department of Immigration, when we get to renew our green card, when we get to petition for our relatives, when we apply for the citizenship, the Department of Immigration can take a look at your records and go back to how did you obtain green card. Even if you are a citizen, they can go as far as how did you get your green card and open your records to see if there was anything there they didn't see before. They might see it at that point. Laws of home country citizenship, there are certain countries that if you become a citizen of another country, you automatically lose that country's citizenship. For some people, that's very important. Many of us do not want to lose our country's, home country's citizenship. So I always advise my clients to make sure that if we are applying, they understand what are the consequences of becoming a citizen. Most countries have what is called dual citizenship. And Anne mentioned before, if you're born in Colombia, I was born in Colombia, South America. I'm a proud US citizen, but I'm also a proud Colombian citizen. So I never lost my I have dual citizenship. Many countries are not like that. So people should be aware of those things. The evaluation of the risk, you need to be aware of these things so you can make an informed decision whether or not to apply. If the petition, like I mentioned before, is denied because of a permanent bar, then you might be exposed to removal. And that's one of the things no one wants to see themselves in. So if you are considering, or anyone who you know is considering to apply for citizenship, make sure that if they have anything in the records, it might be as simple as many of my clients sometimes say, it's a simple misdemeanor. It may not be so simple for immigration purposes. So have them talk to an attorney and make sure everything is going to be good. Who should not apply for citizenship? Obviously, aggravated felony convictions, people who have this kind of records should not apply. False claims to U.S. citizenship and unlawful voting. What is a false claim to U.S. citizenship? Sometimes people, when they are applying for a job and they get the job, we all have these little forms called I-9s. And that's for employment purposes. We have the employer completes a part of the I-9 that says, I saw the documents of this person, is authorized to work, and the person completes a portion of that form that says, I am a US citizen, I am a legal permanent resident, I have authorization to work. Depending as to what they check or how they complete that form, the employer is to verify the status. Some people, complete the form saying I'm a US citizen without being a US citizen. And that's considered false claim of US citizenship. Completing any other form for government purposes or for any benefit and stating I am a US citizen, that's a false claim to US citizenship. And that puts people in deportation proceedings. There is no waiver, there is no way to get around this one. If a person claim falsely that they are a U.S. citizen, they may never be able to apply for U.S. citizenship. And unlawful voting, we're not supposed to vote unless we are U.S. citizens. And one thing that happens, and we have seen this, and it's a mistake on the part of the driver's license office or the motor vehicles department. When you obtained a license to drive, usually they ask you information about your status, and you have to provide some things. And you check voting information, and sometimes they send you information to vote. And sometimes by mistake, and we know this is a fact because it has happened, people receive the cards in their mail saying you can vote without being able to vote. And sometimes people take those cards and they go and vote without being, because they believe the Department of Motor Vehicles, they tell me I can vote, then I'll go and I vote. And they vote. And it becomes a problem for citizenship and immigration purposes. So unless the person is a US citizen, it doesn't matter who told you. You can vote or you can't. Okay. Lying or giving false, misleading information. Ms. Batman touched briefly on this one when you completing your green card process, and sometimes you go to these entities or these offices and you give information, sometimes innocently believing it's the truth, but sometimes fully aware that it's not. That's false, misleading information. Convictions of crimes of moral turpitude. Crimes of moral turpitude within the 5 years of admission. Crimes of moral turpitude, again, that's a great area. And we're talking about prostitution, gambling, a bunch of little things that if you put them all together, they're going to say, nah, this is a crime of moral turpitude. You're not a good moral person, and then they go from there. If the person is still on parole, some people are convicted of certain crimes, significant crimes, felonies mainly, and then they are released on parole before they complete their sentence, and that's while they are on parole, they cannot apply for citizenship. How do you apply for citizenship? You complete the form N400, and you can file it 90 days before you complete the 3 or the 5 years. The current form, and I want to make a note here, the current form is up to expire at the end of September. If anybody is applying and already has the form completed, because it's a long form, it's about 20 pages. It's not complicated in terms of the information that requires, but it's just a lot of work because it's every single page. You need to go through it and complete it. So apply before it expires, more than likely, and we know that is going to be renewed, but it might have few changes. Sometimes they take advantage of that to implement certain changes. So you may want to apply it before it expires. You need 2 passport-style photos, a check for $680. That includes the fingerprint or biometrics fee of $85.
Green card, both side photocopy or the one side?
Both sides. I always ask for the 2 sides. Copy of the green card, and he just asked if only one side of both sides, both sides. Clear, if possible, color copies. They want to see faces, numbers, letters, so clear copies. The fingerprint notice, as everything you do with the Department of Immigration, you submit the petition, you get a receipt, they tell you here is your number, you pay so much. A couple weeks after you get that receipt, you get another notice in the mail from the Department of Immigration telling you where and what time you need to go to get your fingerprints or biometrics done. And then they'll run the record check. After that, if they need more information, they may request more information, or then you'll have to wait for some time. You will not hear from them again unless they need information until they give you the appointment to go for the interview. And at the interview, we already know English and civic test, and then finally the oath. And then we become citizens. That's the form, just a little picture. That's what it looks like. And I already mentioned expires at the end of this month. What is automatic citizenship? Well, children who are born in the United States, they're citizens. Also, if a parent is a legal permanent resident and becomes a citizen before the child turns 18, the child becomes a citizen automatically. Meaning the child granted the child was also a legal permanent resident, okay? Child has to be a legal permanent resident before the 18, parent has to become citizen before the child turns 18. The child becomes automatically a citizen of the United States. That means that child doesn't have to go through the citizenship process. Once the parent is the citizen, they both can apply for the passport together without the child going through the process. But the child has to be under 18 at the time the parent became a citizen. Proof of automatic citizenship. You can see there are some of the documents. The certificate of citizenship, some people have to file a form called a form N600, similar in some ways to the N400, but no interviews, yes fingerprints, and it's just to issue the US citizenship certificate to that specific person. Okay, not go through the process. It's just an application so that person gets a certificate of citizenship. The passport, again, the parent becomes a citizen, and if the child is under 18, at the time he became the citizen, they can both apply for the US passport at the same time. And finally, if the person is born abroad, outside the United States, and is a son or daughter of a US citizen, they can get a consular report of birth abroad, which is the birth certificate, but it's going to be issued outside the United States. I still have a few minutes, right? So if anybody has questions. Okay, so I guess we're good. We're going to take a little break.
Page you have in 400 forms, and it says expires 9/30/2015. It means that immigration is updated that yearly?
Not necessarily yearly, but the Department of Immigration, usually they put an expiration date on all their forms. All of their forms, if you look at any of the immigration forms, right at the bottom on the right hand side corner, there's always an expiration date. Usually, and many times, what they do before reissuing the form, they might implement little changes. If they are technical changes, they will not have to do publications and a bunch of other things. But if there are substantial changes, then they'll have to get approvals and do other things before they can republish the form. They do, when the forms are about to expire, usually they come up with a rule saying the new form will take effect 30 days, 60 days, and until certain day we will continue to accept forms that have these dates. So they should be coming out with something soon, but if they say we will only accept the form, the current one that has an expiration date of 9/30/2015, we will only accept it until December 1st. Then after December 1st, you're no longer to use that form that expired. But they do that frequently with pretty much every form. They have expiration dates. It doesn't mean the program is going to end, because that will stay in the books forever.
I have this form. When I type it, in any column, it says no. Then after that, it is small boxes or not applicable. If I try it, it didn't go. So what I do on that, no column blank, or we put the on the my ink, that's not applicable. What do you do?
What I usually do, and I'm not going to comment specifically on that form unless I'm able to review it completely, but what I usually do, because the form gives people, there's an extensive list of questions, and most of those questions are yes or no, and some of those questions are, if it is yes, then you have to respond a couple other questions, okay? If it is no, obviously you don't have to complete the other questions. Usually, just for my peace of mind, I usually, when there's a question that it doesn't apply, I just put not applicable, NA. If it is no, you have to say no, but if it is not applicable, it's just NA, that's it. But you are to respond yes or no, and then respond to the other questions if you are to respond them.
Can you use the pen? No, NA?
Well, many people complete those forms by hand.
Okay.
Yes, you can do it typewriter, listen to me, and the computer, who uses a typewriter anymore?
If you type it the first week, when you
print it out and then with your handwriting. Yes, you can do that.
By hand.
Yeah, you can do that. In case of doubt, when you are doing something, if you're doing half of the form or some of the form on your computer and then you print it out, and if you're going to do something by hand, put your initials right next to it so no one is going to question that you were the one who made that change, okay?